Hello everyone. In this exercise we are going to learn how to use Visual Basic to manipulate charts in Excel. Charts are obviously one of the most widely used and powerful parts of Excel. It allows you to analyze data in a simple visual fashion. And sometimes you find yourself dealing with massive amounts of data and a huge number of charts, and there are quite a few things when you're dealing with charts that you can automate using Visual Basic, and that can be a really powerful tool to have in your arsenal as you crunch through the spreadsheets that you want to analyze using charts. So we have a fairly simple use case here. The idea is we have this chart and we have this table that has three sets of curves. We have a set of x values in column B, and we have 28 points, or 28 rows of values here. And then we have three columns of functions, F1, F2, and F3. And basically, the first one is a sine, the second one's a cosine, and the third one is just a sine plus 90 degrees, just to offset it. So this is just something to use as an example. And what we want to do in the end is set things up so that you can turn on and off each of these three series, F1, F2, and F3, independently using this set of checkboxes. So what we have charted here is a set of XY scatter plots with three series. They all reference, for the X series, they all reference column B, and for the Y series, they reference different things. So this is F1, and this is F2, and this is F3. And so what we're going to do to accomplish this is we're going to record a macro that modifies the chart, and then we're going to go in and look at the macro. Actually going to record a couple of macros, and we're going to modify the macro so that rather than always turning on or off the same series, we're going to modify the sub, or we're going to add an argument to the macro so that it will modify exactly what we tell it to modify, and then we're going to write some code associated with these checkboxes that calls our modified macros and turns those series on or off for us. Okay, let's dive right in. And if you read through the instructions, the first thing we want to do is record a VB macro called remove series that turns off the display of one of the series in the chart. And right-click on the series and click delete to remove it. Make sure the chart is not selected when you start recording. Now that's when you're dealing with these charts. And by the way, the overall process that we're going through here is something that I've found really useful. If you want to write some code that manipulates charts, just record a few macros and then go modify that code to make it more general purpose. That's always a really powerful strategy. So, but when you do that, you have to remember that you can't have any conditions set up that won't always be in place when you go to run the macro. So one things you want to avoid is have the chart and the series perhaps already selected when you start recording the macro, because selecting the chart is an important part of that process. And if you run if your macro is recorded assuming that the chart is already selected, and then you run it later without the chart selected, it's going to crash. So, and it doesn't hurt to select something twice. So that's why that little caveat is in there. So we'll just select some cell somewhere, and we're gonna delete maybe F3 here. So we're in the Developer tab, and I click on Record Macro. And we'll say remove _ series. And then I'm going to right click on series 3 and select delete, just like that, and stop recording. Wow, is it really that easy? Yeah, that's about it. Okay, so modify the code in the remove series macro so that it takes the name of a series as an argument, and then removes the designated series. Add the name to the index, use the name to index the series collection. So here we go. We're going to go into our code now, and that should be in module 2. So there's our code. It's very simple, and we want to pass in as an argument to this. So right now it's set, it's always going to delete series number 2. And that's not very useful because we want to tell it which series to delete rather than always deleting series number 2. And so we're going to pass the series name as an argument. We'll say sname as string. We'll call that sname. And remember, when you go to, what we have here is a collection. Okay, so first of all, it activates the chart, and I've renamed that chart to be my chart, just so it has a name we can recognize here. And then it says active chart.fullseriescollection2.select. So it needs to select the series that we want to delete. And as you may recall, when you're dealing with a collection, you can index that collection in one of two ways in Visual Basic. You can give it an integer, a number representing which object you want. In this case, it's object number 2. Or you can give it the name of the object. And so we're going to pass that name in, and as long as we know that the series that we're dealing with are named a certain way, then we should be okay. And we can do that by just checking on our series. And we're going to name them F1, F2, and F3. And so if we just take this, if we just delete that number there and replace it with sname, which is the string we're passing in, as long as we pass in a valid name, it will select that and delete it. Okay, now you got to be careful you don't pass in a name that doesn't exist. It'll crash at that point. But hopefully we can set the things up so that that shouldn't happen. And so that's that. That one's pretty easy. Now let's go back and see what we want to do next. Record a VB macro called add series that turns on the display of one of the series in the chart. Make sure the chart is not selected when you start recording the macro, and right-click in a blank part of the chart and click on the select data command to add a new series. So we're going to, the chart is selected now, so I'm just going to select a cell. And let's add back in this F3 series that we deleted a couple minutes ago. And so here we go, record macro, add series. Okay. Now to add a series, you can right click and click on the select data tab, and here in this window it lists the series on the left. So we have a series called F1 and a series called F2. We want to add one called F3 that references the data in column E. So we will select add, and the series name will be F3, and the value is the X values are going, so I put my cursor here, and now I'm going to go over here and select this range of cells. And then for the Y values, I'm going to delete what it has in there, put the cursor in that cell, or that text box, and then I'm going to select that series right there. So we've added a new series. The X values are column B. The Y values are column E. And we click OK, and OK, and stop. So there we go. We removed a series, and now we've added a series. And now we are going to modify this add series macro, just like we did for the remove series macro. So let's jump over here, and here we go. It says add series, So it activates the chart, selects a plot area, creates a new series, gives it a name, equals F3, defines the X values, and then defines the Y values. So we're going to change, we want it, again, this is always going to add F3, and it's always going to put in the reference the values in column E. So we want to make this more generic. We want to make it so that we can tell it what name to use and also what range to use. So we're going to go up here again. We're going to modify. We're going to create a couple of input arguments. Again, we're going to use sname as string. This will be the series name. And then we're going to do sRange as range. So we're going to define the series range. Actually, that's going to be a string. We're going to define that range using a string, and then we're going to stick it right down here. Okay. So let's deal with the name first. Let's go right here and just delete this. So it puts this in this reference to the name as a formula, equals F3, where F3 is in parentheses. And whenever you see like two parentheses, or excuse me, two double quotes together, back to back, that means you're defining a double quote within a text string. So that's why it's kind of complicated, but we're going to simplify this. We're just going to do sname. So we're going to say, just take the contents of this sname string that we pass in as an argument and use that for the series name. And we're going to make sure we pass in F1, F2, F3, one of those options in double quotes, and we should be fine. And then down here, we're going to leave this X, the X range just the way it is, because that's not going to change. But this part right here is going to change, E7 to E34, and that is going to be based on this range string that we pass in. So we're going to pass in as our second argument a text string that says B7 to B34 or C7 to C34. Excuse me, C7 to C34 or D7 to D34 or E7 to E34. So one of those three options. And then we're just going to concatenate that onto sheet 1, and then we will have a properly formatted text string representing the Y values. Okay. Now there's one final thing we have to modify here, and that is the way this code was written when it recorded this macro is it creates a new series, and then apparently that was the third series, so it referenced it as series number 3. Well, we can't, that's not going to work. We can't assume that the series that we created is always going to be series 3, because we might be starting from 1 or 0 series, and so it could be a different number here. So how do we determine what number we should use? And I'm going to show you a little trick. If we say n equals active, I'm going to declare a variable n, active chart dot series collection dot count. Okay. Active chart dot series collection dot count. So we're dealing with this active chart object, and it's a collection, and every collection has a property called count, which returns the number of items in the collection. And whenever you add a new series, it's thrown at the end of the list. So if the number of that new series we just created will always be equal to active chart dot series collection dot count. So I'm going to take that number, that letter n, I'm going to put it right here and right here and right here. So now we should always be referencing the new chart we created, no matter where it is in the list. So at this point, I think we're ready to start writing our code. Let's see. And now if we go back to Excel, so we've recorded 2 macros, and we've modified those macros so that they take arguments that we can use to add or remove a specific series. And now we just need to write code associated with these controls here. So I'm going to go in design mode and double click on F1. Okay. And this opens up the code for the sheet. And it's called CHKF1. Now remember, when you click on a checkbox, you don't know whether the user is clicking on it to turn it off or to turn it on. So we need to have an if statement to determine what we're doing. So we say if CHKF1.value equals true, then, so the user is turning it on, so we need to add a series. So we're going to say add underscore series space. Remember, when you call a sub, you don't put the arguments in parentheses, you just space and then list them. And so we're going to put double quotes F1. So the first argument is the name of the series, okay, and it's a string. The second argument is the range where the Y series is located, defined as a text string. And this is what it's going to look like. In double quotes, $C, $7, $C, $34. So that is the absolute address of that, the Y values for that series we want to add. And then we're going to say else, and by else, what do you do if the user is turning that off? Well, if you're turning it off, then you should call the remove series sub and just pass it the name of the series you want to remove, and that's it. So if you're turning it on, it calls add series, gives it F1 as the name, the range. If you're turning it, if the checkbox is off, we say remove series, and all it needs to do that is the name of the series. Alright, so let's go back to Excel and now double click on the F2. And now this is going to be almost the same, so I'm just going to copy that and I'm going to paste that, and then basically everywhere where it says F1, we're going to change it to F2, and then instead of being in column C here, we're going to be in column D. So F2, 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 and column D. And then let's do one more. Paste. And this would be F3, 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 and then this is column E, similar to the macro that we recorded. And so, by golly, this should work. I think we got everything right. Let's go back and give this a test. So we got to be careful when you're doing this that these checkboxes need to be in sync with the status of these curves when you first start testing your code. Otherwise, things get out of whack. So that when you turn something off, it actually has something to remove. So here we go. We've saved our changes, and let's see. So that removes F1. That removes F2, turns it back on. There we go. And we can go all the way down to where there's 0 series on there and turn them all on. We can have them any combination we want. And look at that. It works beautifully. So again, you know, the pattern that we followed here is we take an existing chart, we record a macro where we add or remove series, and then we look at that code, we think, okay, how can we change that to make it general purpose? And modify the code to the macros to take arguments. And then in this case, we then wrote code in response to click events on checkboxes to run our modified macro code. But you know, in general, there are a lot of different ways. You can create a chart from scratch if you want to, using a macro, and then modify code so that it will generate the chart completely using VB code and chart exactly what you want it to chart. You can do all kinds of things. You can have it line up your charts a certain way. Really, the sky's the limit. So yeah, use this as a pattern and explore and have fun, and you'll be able to do some really cool things with your charts in no time.